Johnny, that's better than most.
How about in?
That is better than most. Better than most!
You're listening to the Bump and Run Golf Podcast on WHIP Radio with Dalton Ballphaser.
Oh, wow! In your life have you seen anything like that?
Good morning, people of Earth and golf fans everywhere. You're listening to the Bump and Run Golf Podcast on WHIP Radio, Philadelphia's #1 college radio station, and this is episode 10, the U.S. Open Golf Championship Preview. It's good to be back after a little bit of a layoff, and I'm excited to talk about the 116th playing of the United States Open Championship, and I'm going to talk about the most interesting, the worst, and the best things that have happened at the U.S. Open throughout its history. I am also going to give my picks for who I like at this year's playing of the U.S. Open at Oakmont in Pittsburgh. So stay tuned. You're listening to the Bump and Run Golf Podcast on WHIP Radio, Philadelphia's #1 college radio station. This year's playing of the United States Open will be played at Oakmont Country Club out near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and this famous old-school golf course will provide a great test to the world's greatest golfers, and the club was founded by H.C. Founds in 1903, has hosted more United States Open championships than any other club. Founds envisioned a golf club much like the celebrated links courses in Britain, like St. Andrews, among other golf courses. At this year's playing of the U.S. Open, after taking a look at the scorecard at Oakmont and prior U.S. Opens, there are a few things that I feel are going to be important in determining the champion of the 116th United States Open. And first, I want to look at 3 holes that I feel will play a big part in determining the champion of this golf tournament at Oakmont Country Club. And the first one I want to start out with is the opening hole itself, 482-yard par 4, which plays a good amount downhill. But back in 2007, the last time the U.S. Open was at Oakmont, it played as one of the toughest holes on the golf course, and it's the opening hole, so getting off to a good start will be important for the guys this week. The second hole that I think will be very important in determining a champion is number 8, a long par 3 at 288 yards. The USGA's Mike Davis said that the USGA will put the tees all the way back on number 8 one day and make it a 300-yard par 3, basically making everyone in the field hit a wood, a hybrid of some sort, or some guys, like a Zach Johnson or a shorter hitter on tour, are going to have to hit driver on that hole, and it's going to play very tough. In 2007, it averaged about half a stroke to 2/3 of a stroke over par for the field for the week. I have a feeling that 8th hole at 300 yards is going to cause some of the pros to show some anger, show some emotion, like last year at Chambers Bay, where you had Billy Horschel making the fish motion with his hand with the almost broccoli-like greens that were at Chambers Bay, which was a horrible host of the U.S. Open. But this 300-yard par 3 would be a joke at many other clubs around the world, but somehow Oakmont's able to pull it off. A lot of golf architects embrace the idea of this long par 3 to require these really skilled golfers to use those long metals and those long hybrids to get to the green. And it almost seems like a technology measure as well, with everyone hitting it so far off the tee, to really challenge them and make them use that technology. Because back in the 1970s, they would never have a 300-yard par 3 because the guys that were leading driving distance on tour were only averaging about 270 yards. So they wouldn't even be able to reach the green unless it was really fast and firm that they got a lot of roll. And the last hole that I'm looking at, and at most U.S. Opens is the key hole, is number 18, a 484-yard par 4 that goes right back into the clubhouse and is one of the toughest tests in golf. The large putting green adjacent with the practice putting surface will give the players a very tough test coming down the stretch, and you wonder, and I wonder as well, if that 18th hole is going to play key for someone coming down the stretch needing to make a par or make something happen to get into a playoff with someone sitting pretty in the clubhouse. Before the 2007 U.S. Open, approximately 5,000 trees were removed along Oakmont's fairways, and really highlighting the really tough bunkers that they have, especially the famous church pews on holes 3 and 4. But since that 2007 U.S. Open, the golf course superintendent John Zimmers Jr. and his team removed about another 7,500 trees off the property at Oakmont, making it almost a link-style course now, which is what Founds wanted at his original design. They went away from it, and then now they came back to it. But something that's really going to be key to determining this champion is the greens. The greens at Oakmont are going to be incredibly fast. I've been doing a lot of reading, Golf Digest, golf.com, and there's so much stuff about what the USGA and Mike Davis, who is the executive director and CEO of the USGA, is trying to do to get these greens as firm and fast as possible. Because in the last 2 growing seasons at Oakmont Country Club, the putting greens have been double drilled and filled 4 times. They've been core aerated, deep aeration 4 times as well. And they also verticut 5 times, which makes the greens extremely fast, adds a lot of speed. And specifically during the U.S. Open, the greens will be mowed 4 times and rolled twice each day. So there isn't going to be any grass left on these greens. They're going to be brown, they're going to be firm, they're going to be fast. And I just saw Ricky Fowler had a Snapchat story about a putt that he was hitting on one of the holes on the back 9, and it just rolled and rolled and rolled and rolled, and it didn't stop. So being able to keep the ball below the hole will be very key, because above the hole, you can almost kiss your ball goodbye. That's how fast these greens are going to be. And if the wind's up as well out there in Pittsburgh, it's going to be a really, really tough United States Open. One that will probably finish over par, because in 2007, Angel Cabrera won by a shot over Jim Furyk and Tiger Woods at 5 over par. And I don't see someone shooting under par here at Oakmont, especially with the conditions that they want and how the USGA wants the course to play. And in that practice round where Ricky Fowler's ball just continued to roll and roll, the Stimpmeter, which measures the speed of the greens on a golf course, was around 15 feet 6 inches, which is just ungodly fast. 11 to 12 feet is pretty fast, and for most amateur golfers, or anything around 11 is just probably a little too fast than it has to be. But almost 16 feet on the Stimpmeter, it's incredible how fast these greens are going to be, and it's going to really be interesting to see who's going to be able to keep their mental game together, because you're going to have 3 putts. You're going to have putts that you miss that are 3 feet, and you have a 7-footer coming back. It's going to be really interesting to see whose caddy and whose mental stability is really going to play out in this tournament. And another thing that I found interesting throughout reading Golf Digest and such was that if the USGA ever got to a situation where they needed to have a U.S. Open at another course because the course that was supposed to be used for the U.S. Open was closed, or something happened that they weren't comfortable hosting it there anymore, the USGA feels that Oakmont would be able to do it, and I think they could, because they just have such a great knowledge of the golf course, what they're trying to do, and they keep the golf course in peak condition all the time, so it's not like they have to make a lot of changes. The only changes that would be tough would be the grandstands and such, but if you get enough volunteers and crew members, they can get that done and get it ready. So now that I've given a little background on the history of Oakmont Country Club and what to expect at this golf tournament, I want to go into the best, worst, and most interesting moments from the U.S. Open over the past 116 years. So next up is Pin Seeking U.S. Open Edition.
Be the right club. Be the right club today. Oh, yeah. Yes!
In my opinion, the best moment and the best 4-day performance in the United States Open history was Tiger Woods' 2000 U.S. Open victory at Pebble Beach, where he won by an insane and U.S. Open record that still stands to this day, 15 shots, after shooting 12 under par over the 4-day tournament. And that was where it all started for Tiger, and the beginning of his Tiger Slam in 2000, heading into 2001, where he won the U.S. Open at Pebble Beach in the summer. He won the British Open at St. Andrews. He won the PGA Championship at Valhalla over Bob May in a playoff. Then he won the 2001 Masters at Augusta National, and this was the time where Tiger was just firing on all cylinders, and he was really dominating the game of golf. And just recent news has come out about Tiger, and he will not be participating in this year's U.S. Open at Oakmont, and thank God he is not. I'm as big a Tiger fan as anyone out there, but having him play his first competitive tournament in close to a year at the toughest course in the United States is not what he wanted to do, because he was going home after the first 2 days and he would have just been miserable. He might have shot in the 90s, because that course does not take any prisoners out in Pittsburgh, and they wouldn't have taken it easy on Tiger. He would have really struggled to find the fairways, get out of the rough, and just come back. And he just needs to take the time that he needs and maybe play in some fall events later on this year just to get some confidence, get the feel for tournament golf again, because the U.S. Open or the Memorial Tournament at Muirfield Village a couple weeks ago, which he was considering playing, are not the best places to start for Tiger Woods. He needs to get it back together and try to make one last run in his 40s. Now, I want to add something a little special to this Best of the U.S. Open segment. I want to talk about the best round ever in a U.S. Open, and it happened to come at the 1973 U.S. Open at Oakmont by young Californian Johnny Miller, who on that Saturday shot a 76 and was a little bit out of the lead, and on Sunday just absolutely took it to the field, and he shot a 63. I found to be the most impressive out of Johnny Miller's 63 was his approximately 9 shots gained from tee to green. He was 9 shots better than the field off the tee and hitting his approach shots and short game to the green than anyone else in the field, which is incredible. 9 shots better than the field, and he was one of 4 players that day to break 70 on Oakmont's famed 18-hole course. And the only others to break 70 that day were Lanny Watkins, who shot the second best score of 65, and then Ralph Johnston and Jack Nicklaus both shot 68. And the reason why this round is so impressive is with the persimmons, and the reason why this round is so impressive is from the persimmon woods, the blades, everything. If they played with technology nowadays, it wouldn't be as impressive because they can hit it 350 yards. But these guys were only hitting it 270 off the tee, and Johnny Miller was absolutely fearless off the tee. He pulled his driver out on holes that people wouldn't even think to pull out driver, and that's where he gained all those shots tee to green, because he was hitting wedges and really going at pins, and he said that he never took his eye off the flagstick, and it really proved good for him. He shot 63 that day, and in my opinion, that's the greatest round ever at the U.S. Open. And going back to Tiger for a second, his 12 under par total of 272 stood in stone for 12 years until young Northern Irishman Rory McIlroy broke that record 2011 in his blowout victory at Congressional, where he finished with a 4-day total of 268, which at Congressional was 16 under par, and took his first U.S. Open championship, and after his debacle at the Masters just a couple months prior, which also can foreshadow something for the young Texan Jordan Spieth, which I will talk about a little later in this show. Now, to the worst moment in United States Open golf history, and for all you golf enthusiasts out there, I think you have an idea where this one's going.
What the hell's going on out here?
In my opinion, the worst thing that has ever happened at the U.S. Open over the past 116 tournaments was at the 2006 U.S. Open at Winged Foot. And all you golf enthusiasts out there know what happened. That was Phil Mickelson's best chance to win the United States Open, and he just absolutely choked on the last hole at Winged Foot. Personally, I always heard about Phil Mickelson's choke at Winged Foot back in 2006, but I never actually saw what happened. And looking on YouTube, I got to watching some videos, and all he needed was a par to beat Jeff Ogilvy by a shot, because Ogilvy was in the clubhouse at +5, and once he got up to the tee, on the tee, him and his caddy, Bones Mackay, went with driver off the tee, and he just completely pushed it out to the left. And here's what the NBC crew, specifically Johnny Miller, had to say about that swing by Phil Mickelson and why driver was not the right choice off the tee.
All right, tee shot for Mickelson.
This better be a forward.
Doesn't like this
ball
one.
going way left, way left. Oh, what a bounce out into the rough to the right. But I don't think that'll leave him much.
Off of the hospitality tent.
I'll tell you what, right now Ben Hogan is officially rolled over in his grave. I cannot believe he didn't hit forward there.
Anything you can detect here, Johnny, from this swing?
It's just a classic. You don't release your right side, left side in his case. Comes down pretty good shape there. Maybe overswung a little. He's late coming into it. He releases probably 3 inches late. possibly because of nervousness and also overswinging. Faces open, and out it goes.
Then Phil tried to hit a miracle cut shot out of the rough, and it hit off a tree. And then his third went into the right greenside bunker, which it plugged, so he had no chance really to get up and down. And he made double bogey and lost the U.S. Open to Jeff Ogilvy via shot, and that was his best chance to win the U.S. Open. 2013 at Marion, he had a really nice chance to win as well, but after hitting it over the back of the green on the par 3 on the back 9, the short par 3, he lost that one as well. And one of the greats of the game, Phil Mickelson, just like Sam Snead, who never won a U.S. Open championship, and by not being able to win the U.S. Open so far, Phil is still eluded from the career Grand Slam, but he's got a couple more chances left to win the U.S. Open and get that career Grand Slam, but time is running out for him. And here's what he had to say after his round in 2006, and that famous quote that he said that he was such an idiot for doing what he did on the last.
I don't know what happened on those bunkers. I've never seen that much sand all week. I still am in shock that I did that. I just can't believe that I did that. I am such an idiot.
If Phil never wins a U.S. Open, he will always look back on that tournament as one that got away from him. And just a couple of weeks ago, the USGA 4-ball championship was at Winged Foot, and his brother Tim Nicholson, who is the coach at Arizona State, asked for some advice on the golf course, and Phil gave him advice on holes 1 through 17, and his brother Tim said to him, well, what about 18? And Phil said, no, I don't have any advice for you on that hole, which was pretty funny out of the lefty who really lost that tournament in 2006. And now the most interesting thing that's happened in the U.S. Open over the past 116 years came at 2012 at the Olympic Club, where Webb Simpson and Bob Costas got a unique visitor on the 18th green.
That's 2, that's far shooter.
Oh, you can count. Good for you.
And you can count on me waiting for you in the parking lot.
After winning his first major at the 2012 U.S. Open at the Olympic Club in San Francisco, Webb Simpson was being interviewed by Bob Costas, and after, asking him some questions about the round and where he felt that it turned around for him after 4 birdies in a 5-hole stretch, he and Costas got an unexpected visitor that they called the Birdman on the 18th green, and he had to be taken off the premises by good old Mike Davis, the USGA's executive director and CEO. Take a listen to the interview by Bob Costas to Webb Simpson and how Webb Simpson changes after he sees the Birdman and his response to the incident.
I couldn't be happier right now, and congrats to Graham and Michael for playing great golf.
You go 68-68 on the weekend, and a burst of 3 straight birdies and 4 in a 5-hole stretch turned it around for you today.
Yeah, that was kind of the difference. I got off to a slow start, but I knew that I knew...
Always something to spice matters up.
Yeah, enjoy the gel cell, pal.
A guy wearing a beanie-type cap with the British flag on it came out and made bird noises. I don't know what the point of that was, but it was quite interesting, and it was something that I haven't seen before at a golf tournament. You see streakers and all that types of stuff, but you never see anything like that, which was just weird at a U.S. Open, which is such a strict in how the golfers conduct themselves and everything like that. So now I'm going to go and talk about some keys to winning the U.S. Open this year and some of the guys that I like. And as I mentioned earlier, to win this U.S. Open, you got to have mental fortitude, you need to be good on the greens, and you need to be very patient. And also, there are some holes out there. The 2 par 5s at Oakmont are over 600 yards. One is 609 yards, and the other one can play upwards of 670 yards, which is incredibly long. They play downhill, so they'll play a little shorter, but still, they'll be playing over 600 yards. I think being long off the tee is very important in this tournament as well, because being able to hit it out there 330 in the rough and have a wedge compared to 270 and have, a 3-wood in may be the difference. And it all depends the weather. If they want it really windy, it's going to favor a low ball player, a very good ball striker. But I think someone that's long off the tee and is very good in their strokes gained putting can really have a good chance of winning this tournament. Guys like Brooks Koepka, Dustin Johnson, even Bubba Watson, who's been kind of flying under the radar this year. He won at the Northern Trust Open, at Riviera earlier this year, but he really hasn't been around much. You don't hear much about him. And the key with Bubba is his ability to have good memories on good golf courses where he's played well. And he had a really nice finish at the 2007 U.S. Open, so I think he's a very good bet to have a pretty good week at the U.S. Open. If he can stay patient, I think Bubba Watson may have a decent chance to win this golf tournament because he always struggles on the British Open courses. He missed the cut last year at St. Andrews, which many thought he would have success at, being able to hit it a long ways. And the Masters is usually set up for him, and the PGA, he's had okay success over the years. But the U.S. Open, he's never really contended that much. But having good success at 2007 at Oakmont may serve Bubba Watson well. And he might be able to come down the stretch and take this one home. But it could be a guy like Jordan Spieth, as I mentioned earlier, collapsed at the Masters on the 12th hole where he made a 7 and basically choked, losing himself a second consecutive green jacket, just like Rory McIlroy in 2011, where he came to the back nine with quite a bit of a lead and just completely lost it on the 10th hole and came back and won the U.S. Open at Congressional in record fashion. So Jordan Spieth's an interesting guy. Putts well, pretty good iron player, good with the short game. Doesn't hit it a long ways, but finds a lot of fairways. So that'll be interesting to see if Spieth can handle it. Rory McIlroy, it's a tough choice because he's been back and forth with his putting. Putting's going to be crucial, and I don't think he's going to have it at Oakmont. And then you have guys out there like Justin Rose. So it'll be interesting to see. But if I had to pick someone, I would go with Bubba, as long as his patience is at a high level, because we know sometimes how irritated Bubba can get when things aren't going his way. I will be heading out to the U.S. Open at Oakmont, which it'll be my first experience as a spectator in tournament golf, so I'm excited about that. See how these guys really go about playing and see what a championship golf course looks like in Oakmont Country Club. So I'll bring you that recap next week where I will talk about my experiences at Oakmont, what I took away from the tournament, and how what I saw at Oakmont will lead us into the British Open, the PGA Championship, the Olympics, and even the Ryder Cup coming up in just a few months. So this will end episode 10, the U.S. Open preview. It was good to be back, talk some golf, and talk about one of my favorite tournaments of the year. I love the challenge that the guys have to face. They really have to grind and think about every shot to really get the best out of themselves to try to win the nation's championship. And all the Americans really want to win this tournament. And it would be really cool to go out there to Oakmont and see Phil Mickelson win this golf tournament. But I just don't think it's in the cards for Phil coming up this week. But it'll be interesting to see how these guys go about their routines and how they go about competing on a course where the green speeds could exceed 16 feet, which I don't think they will because the USGA would just think that's ridiculous. But they could be in the high 14s, low 15s, which would be really impressive. So I want to thank you all out there for listening and stay tuned for my US Open recap next week. Once again, I'd like to thank you all out there for listening, and you can follow me on Twitter at Dalton Balthaser for all the latest news in the golf industry. And until next time, my golf friends, for Hammer.